What happens when a film goes too far? Even for old Hollywood. These aren't just movies. They were warnings, scandals, and in some cases, crimes against the status quo. Banned, buried, and condemned, these 20 dangerous films shocked censors and terrified studios. Some were ahead of their time. Others were just too much. From forbidden love to graphic violence, these stories will leave you stunned. Ready to see what Hollywood tried to hide? Stay until the very end. Freaks, 1932. Too real for its time. In 1932, MGM took a risk. They gave director Todd Browning, fresh off the success of Dracula, free rein to make his passion project. What he delivered was Freaks, a film so unsettling, so ahead of its time, it was banned in the United Kingdom for over 3 decades and nearly ruined his career. Freaks didn't use makeup or special effects to portray its circus sideshow characters. Instead, Browning cast real people with disabilities and physical differences. Conjoined twins, a man with no limbs, a woman without arms, a man with microcephaly. But this wasn't exploitation. It was empowerment. The so-called freaks were the heroes. The villains, beautiful, able-bodied characters who mocked, used, and betrayed them. The plot turns when Cleopatra, a heartless trapeze artist, seduces a little person named Hans for his inheritance. When her cruel scheme is revealed, the community of sideshow performers takes brutal revenge in one of the most unforgettable sequences in film history. Crawling through mud during a rainstorm, their silhouettes in lightning flashes, the freaks become a terrifying symbol of justice. Audiences weren't ready. One woman reportedly suffered a miscarriage after watching it. Test screenings were a disaster. People fled the theaters. MGM chopped out over 30 minutes of footage. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it. Critics called it sickening, inhuman, and grotesque. Browning never recovered. He would never direct another major film. Yet, decades later, Freaks was rediscovered by film historians who saw it not as horror, but as tragedy. A dark, beautiful tale of dignity, revenge, and human cruelty. One critic wrote, "It's not about them being different. It's about how we treat those who are." Today, it's considered a cult masterpiece. But if Freaks was too disturbing to look at, the next film proved that suggestion could be just as dangerous, and far more scandalous. Baby Doll, 1956, the film the church tried to kill. Baby Doll wasn't a horror film, but it terrified a very different kind of audience. Religious leaders and moral crusaders. Released in 1956, it was written by Tennessee Williams and directed by Elia Kazan, 2 men who loved poking at the soft underbelly of American decency. The story centers on a 19-year-old bride, Baby Doll Megan, played by Carol Baker. She's married to an older man but refuses to consummate the marriage. Instead, she lounges in a crib-like bed, sucks her thumb, and flirts shamelessly with another man played by Eli Wallach. It was strange, sultry, and filled with sexual tension that never quite exploded, but always simmered. The poster alone, Baker lying on a brass bed in a see-through nightgown, was enough to cause national outrage. The Catholic Legion of Decency slapped it with a condemned rating, calling it morally repellent. Churches urged boycotts. City officials banned it outright. The New York Times refused to advertise it. Yet critics praised it for its boldness. "This film is a masterclass in suggestion," one reviewer wrote. "It makes you uncomfortable without ever crossing the line." The tension between innocence and seduction made the film feel dangerous, almost radioactive. Kazan refused to make cuts. "If we don't challenge them, they'll keep deciding what we're allowed to see," he said. Tennessee Williams was even more blunt. "They're scared because we're holding up a mirror." The controversy turned Baby Doll into a sensation and briefly made Carol Baker one of the most talked about women in America. But the backlash also marked her. Studios were cautious about hiring her. She had become a symbol of controversy. Still, the film marked a turning point. It asked, who gets to define morality? And how much are we willing to risk to tell the truth? But if Baby Doll played with fire, Howard Hughes was about to throw gasoline on it. The Outlaw, 1943, Breasts, Censors, and Billy the Kid. Howard Hughes was no stranger to scandal, but The Outlaw was his most brazen move. Filmed in 1941 but not widely released until years later, it wasn't the story of Billy the Kid that sparked outrage. It was Jane Russell's cleavage. Hughes, obsessed with pushing boundaries, designed a custom bra for Russell that exaggerated her bust line in extreme close-ups. He instructed cameramen to shoot her from angles that left little to the imagination. The Hays office, responsible for upholding Hollywood's moral code, went ballistic. They demanded cuts. Hughes refused. So he did what he did best: turned controversy into marketing. He orchestrated a campaign built around what people couldn't see. Billboards and posters leaned into the sexuality. He hired skywriters to fly messages like, "What are the censors afraid of?" over major cities. The buzz worked. People lined up around the block to see what the fuss was about. They weren't watching the movie, Jane Russell later joked. They were watching me. Eventually, Hughes released the film in select theaters without approval, provoking legal battles that only fueled public interest. Ironically, the film itself wasn't very good, but it didn't matter. The Outlaw changed how movies were promoted, using censorship as a selling point. This was the moment when Hollywood realized something dangerous. Banning a film could be the best way to make it a hit. And if a close-up of a bra could cause this much chaos, what would happen when a film dared to speak forbidden words out loud? The Moon is Blue, 1953. The film that said virgin. It sounds laughable now, but in 1953, simply saying the word virgin on screen was enough to start a firestorm. That's exactly what The Moon is Blue did, and it changed the film industry forever. Directed by Otto Preminger, the film was a light romantic comedy about a woman who insists on staying a virgin until marriage. It was witty, innocent, and mostly conversation-driven. But the dialogue used words like seduce, pregnant, and yes, virgin. That broke the rules of the Motion Picture Production Code. The Production Code Administration refused to give the film a seal. Most directors would have cut the offending words. Preminger didn't flinch. He released it anyway, without approval, a move considered unthinkable at the time. The backlash was instant. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it. Several states banned it outright. One official called it dangerous to public morality. But something strange happened. The Moon is Blue became a box office smash. Audiences loved it. They didn't see filth. They saw realism. One reviewer wrote, "People talk like this. Why shouldn't our movies?" The film's success weakened the power of the production code. It proved that audiences were ready to hear grown-up conversations. And it inspired other filmmakers to challenge the rules. But where The Moon is Blue flirted with taboo, the next film didn't just cross the line. It obliterated it with a moment that would follow its star for the rest of her life. Ecstasy, 1933. Hedy Lamarr's nude scandal. Before she was a Hollywood icon, Hedy Lamarr was a young actress in Europe and the face of one of cinema's first true scandals. In 1933, she starred in a Czech film called Ecstasy. It was quiet and poetic, a story about a young woman in a passionless marriage who finds love and physical pleasure with a stranger. But it wasn't the story that shocked audiences. It was the visuals. Lamarr appeared nude. She ran through a meadow, bathed in a pond, and smiled as her lover kissed her neck. But the scene that changed everything was the one where she has an orgasm, fully clothed, shot from the neck up. No nudity, just her face. But it was the first time a mainstream film depicted a woman experiencing pleasure on screen. And the world wasn't ready. Ecstasy was banned in the United States and many Catholic countries for decades. The Vatican called it a sin on film. Moralists accused the film of corrupting women, but it was Lamar who paid the highest price. The scandal followed her for the rest of her life. When she arrived in Hollywood, MGM tried to erase her past, but it was no use. "They never saw me after that," Lamar once said. "They only saw her." Ironically, Hedy Lamarr would later co-invent technology that became the basis for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. She wasn't just beautiful, she was a genius. But to many, she would always be the woman from Ecstasy. Her scandal rocked the industry, but the next film would prove that violence, not sex, could be just as dangerous. Scarface, 1932. Too violent, too real. Before Al Pacino shouted, "Say hello to my little friend," there was Paul Muni, cold-eyed, snarling, and terrifying in the original Scarface. Released in 1932, this early gangster film was so intense, so graphic, and so real that it rattled censors and politicians alike. Directed by Howard Hawks and loosely based on the life of Al Capone, Scarface didn't hold back. It showed gang wars in brutal detail, drive-by shootings, and cold-blooded murders, set to jazzy music and dripping in attitude. Paul Muni's character, Tony Camonte, was an unrepentant, gun-toting monster with charm. He didn't just kill, he enjoyed it. But what made the film truly dangerous was that it didn't feel like fiction. It mirrored headlines too closely. Politicians were panicking about organized crime at the time, and here was Hollywood seemingly glorifying it. Newspapers asked, "Is this film a tribute to murderers?" The Hays office refused to approve it. Cities like Chicago, where Capone still had influence, banned it outright. It took 2 years of legal fights, re-editing, and retitling before it was finally released in a watered-down version, with a moralistic ending tacked on, and the subtitle "Shame of the Nation" added to the poster. But even in its censored form, the film shocked audiences. "I had never seen anything so raw," one theater-goer recalled. "It felt like watching the news, but the news had blood on it." Capone himself allegedly owned a personal copy of the film. That alone tells you how close to the bone it cut. Scarface didn't just challenge the rules, it exposed the fragility of them. And it showed that violence, stylized, seductive violence, could be just as controversial as sex. But if Scarface used bullets to make its point, the next film used silence, shadows, and the chilling presence of Peter Lorre to terrify audiences with something even darker: the human mind. M. 1931. Pedophilia, paranoia, and pre-Nazism. Long before American studios flirted with psychological horror, German director Fritz Lang gave the world M, a haunting, skin-crawling masterpiece about a child killer that shook audiences to their core. The film opens with children playing in the street. One by one, they vanish. Posters go up. Whispers spread. And then we meet him, Hans Beckert, played with eerie brilliance by Peter Lorre. He whistles classical music as he stalks his victims. He's soft-spoken, sweaty, and terrified of himself. But he can't stop. Released in 1931, M didn't show blood. It didn't need to. The terror was in suggestion. A balloon floating away. A child's empty seat at the dinner table. The horror of a society that could not protect its most vulnerable. It was too much for many. Though it was made in Germany, American theaters hesitated to show it. When it finally premiered in Hollywood, it was heavily edited, and even then it was banned in several cities. The themes of pedophilia, mental illness, and mob justice made people deeply uncomfortable. But what made M truly dangerous was how it blurred the lines between criminal and victim. Beckert's desperate speech, "I can't help myself, I have no control," was a direct challenge to how society saw evil. Was he a monster? Or a man in need of help? The question left audiences reeling. The film also carried an eerie political shadow. It came out just 2 years before the Nazis seized power. Its themes of mass paranoia, surveillance, and fear would echo chillingly in the years to come. M wasn't just a film. It was a warning, and it became a blueprint for every serial killer film that followed. But while M showed us the dangers hidden behind closed doors, the next film dared to put race and identity front and center, in a way that made entire states try to shut it down. Pinky, 1949. Passing, Race, and Backlash. In 1949, Pinky pushed into territory Hollywood had long been too afraid to touch: race, identity, and the painful lie of passing. The film followed a light-skinned black woman named Patricia Pinky Johnson, played controversially by white actress Jen Crane. After years of passing as white in the North, Pinky returns to the South and is forced to choose between hiding who she is or embracing her heritage and facing the consequences. It was an emotional powder keg. The film didn't just hint at racism, it laid it bare. Pinky is spit on, assaulted, and humiliated. Her relationship with a white doctor teeters on the edge of being romantic, and that suggestion alone was enough to send censors into a frenzy. The film was outright banned in cities across the American South. In Marshall, Texas, the police physically stopped a screening. Politicians called it dangerous propaganda. Others labeled it unnatural. And yet, the performances were mesmerizing. Ethel Waters, who played Pinky's grandmother, was dignified and heartbreaking. And Jean Crane, though criticized for being miscast, gave the role a fragile, haunting presence. People weren't ready to see a black woman treated like a human being, one historian later said. They weren't ready for truth. Pinky was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, but it left Hollywood divided. Studios saw how profitable controversy could be, but they also saw the backlash that came with telling stories that challenged the status quo. Still, the film cracked something open. It laid the foundation for the civil rights dramas of the 1960s. But while Pinky faced censorship for what it dared to say, the next film was condemned for what it implied, for daring to touch a nerve the church didn't want touched. The Miracle, 1950, a Virgin Mother controversy. It was only 40 minutes long, but The Miracle caused a storm that would change American law and force the Supreme Court to decide whether a film could offend religion and still be protected as free speech. Directed by Italian master Roberto Rossellini, the short film was part of an anthology called L'Amore, and it told the story of a mentally fragile shepherd woman who becomes pregnant after a mysterious stranger, implied to be God or a saint, has sex with her. Believing she's carrying the next Messiah, she's mocked and abandoned by her village. But she clings to her faith. The Catholic Church was livid. Newspapers called it sacrilegious filth. In New York, the state's censorship board banned it immediately, citing blasphemy. Theaters were threatened. Protesters picketed outside art houses. But film distributor Joseph Burston didn't back down. He took the fight all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and won. In the landmark Burston v. Wilson decision of 1952, the court ruled that films were entitled to First Amendment protection. It was the first time movies were granted the same speech rights as books or newspapers. Still, the damage was done. The Miracle was seen by few, but feared by many. To some, it was a beautiful, painful allegory of faith and rejection. To others, it was an attack on Christianity itself. As one viewer wrote at the time, "It's not the film that's offensive, it's what it makes you feel." But while The Miracle sparked a war between religion and free speech, the next film on our list caused something even more explosive: riots in the street, public bans, and a legacy tainted by hate. Pinky, 1949, Passing, Race, and Backlash. By the late 1940s, America was still deeply divided by race, and Pinky didn't just stir the pot, it flipped it over. Directed by Elia Kazan and starring Gene Crane, Pinky told the story of a light-skinned black woman who passes for white in the North but returns home to the South, where her true identity threatens to destroy her life. Though the role should have gone to a black actress, studio fears about backlash led them to cast Crane, a white woman, in blackface makeup, an act now viewed as controversial and offensive, but at the time was considered the only way to get the film made. Still, the story itself was electric. Pinky is torn between two worlds. In one, she's accepted. In the other, she's despised. When she falls in love with a white doctor who doesn't know her real background, everything unravels. She's beaten, publicly shamed, and nearly imprisoned. And yet, she refuses to deny who she is. Southern cities fought back. The film was banned in Texas and Tennessee. In one Georgia town, a theater owner was arrested for showing it. Politicians called it racial propaganda, while others accused Hollywood of trying to incite rebellion. And yet, audiences came anyway. The performances, especially Ethel Waters as Pinky's grandmother, were breathtaking. Waters delivered one line that still echoes: "You can be proud and black, but you gotta be brave too." Despite the controversy, Pinky earned 3 Academy Award nominations and helped open the door for more honest depictions of race in American cinema. But that honesty came at a cost. If Pinky revealed the cruelty of society's rules, the next film would dive into something darker, into the heart of man's twisted desire to play God. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Beast Men and Banned Ideas. From the moment it begins, Island of Lost Souls feels wrong, beautifully, disturbingly wrong. Based on H.G. Wells's novel The Island of Dr. Moreau, the 1932 film stars Charles Laughton as a sadistic scientist who lives on a remote island creating human-animal hybrids through surgery. They walk, talk, and even think like people, but they remember they are beasts. And when they begin to rebel against their creator, the results are horrifying. The film was drenched in atmosphere: fog, shadows, howls in the night. The creatures, half man, half beast, groaned and stared with dead eyes. Laughton played Dr. Moreau like a man possessed. "Do you know what it means to feel like God?" he whispers, just before slicing into another victim. It was banned in the UK until 1958. In the US, local boards cut entire scenes. Religious groups condemned it for portraying man trying to replace God. Others couldn't stomach the implied sexual tension between the beast men and the film's human female lead. But beneath the gore was a deeper fear. What happens when man's obsession with science overtakes his morality? When creation becomes corruption? Critics were divided. Some called it disgusting. Others called it genius. Wells himself hated it, saying it missed the point of his novel. But he was wrong. The film didn't miss the point. It amplified it. As the beast men chant, "Are we not men?" in one of the film's most haunting scenes, it forces the viewer to ask the same thing. Where does the line between man and monster really lie? That question would echo in the next film, a Tennessee Williams adaptation so filled with shadows, secrets, and sin that even the censors didn't know where to begin. Suddenly, last summer, 1959, homosexuality and insanity. By 1959, the production code was still in effect, but it was fraying. And when suddenly, last summer came along, it tore another piece clean off. Based on a play by Tennessee Williams, the film starred Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery Clift, and Katharine Hepburn in a Gothic tale that dripped with madness, desire, and secrets best left buried. Taylor plays a young woman institutionalized after witnessing the horrific death of her cousin Sebastian. Clift is the psychiatrist trying to uncover the truth, and Hepburn is Sebastian's mother, who will do anything to keep that truth hidden. That truth? Sebastian was gay. He used his cousin to attract young men while traveling through Europe. When they discovered the ruse, they killed him, ripping him apart in a shocking scene implied but never shown. The word homosexuality is never spoken, but it hangs in the air like a storm cloud. Censors were horrified. Some theaters refused to screen it. In several countries, it was banned outright. One religious group called it an abomination of good taste. The sexual implications, the suggestion of cannibalism, and the brutal portrayal of mental illness were too much for conservative audiences. But beneath the melodrama, there was tragedy. Sebastian never appears in the film, yet his absence shapes everything. The shame his mother feels, the trauma Taylor's character suffers, the silence that surrounds it all. And then there's Taylor herself. Feral, broken, magnificent. One critic called her performance a scream against a world that refuses to understand. Suddenly, last summer pushed the envelope on what could be discussed in American cinema. It wasn't just about queerness, it was about repression, trauma, and the rot behind respectable facades. But even this film's quiet devastation couldn't prepare audiences for what came next. A clockwork nightmare, drenched in violence and set to Beethoven. A Clockwork Orange, 1971, technically post-Golden Age, still vital. It wasn't made during the Golden Age, but its shadow stretches back to the battles fought in that era. When Stanley Kubrick released A Clockwork Orange in 1971, it was as if every film that had once been banned, cut, or condemned had been leading to this. Based on Anthony Burgess's novel, the film follows Alex, a teenage sociopath who rapes, beats, and kills with a sick grin and a love for classical music. He's finally captured and subjected to experimental conditioning meant to strip him of his free will. The film opens with one of the most shocking sequences in cinema: violence, nudity, and a tone of cold detachment that made it all feel far too casual. That was the point. Kubrick wasn't glorifying Alex. He was showing us a world where violence was normal and where society's attempt to control it was just as monstrous. The backlash was instant. It was banned in Ireland and other countries. In the UK, Kubrick himself pulled it from circulation after death threats were sent to his family. Religious leaders called it evil. Psychologists warned it would inspire copycat crimes. And yet, A Clockwork Orange was also hailed as a masterpiece. It was nominated for 4 Oscars. Its visual style, bold editing, and eerie use of Beethoven turned it into a cultural phenomenon. One critic wrote, "It holds a mirror up to our darkest desires and dares us to look." If the Golden Age tried to hide those desires, this film exposed them, raw and unfiltered. And it owed its very existence to another film, a scandalous small-town drama that cracked the door open for this tidal wave of cinematic rebellion. Peyton Place, 1957. The film that opened the floodgates. Before there was Desperate Housewives, before Twin Peaks, before Riverdale, there was Peyton Place. Released in 1957 and based on Grace Metalius's scandalous novel, this film ripped the mask off the perfect American town. Behind the white picket fences and smiling neighbors were secrets: incest, rape, abortion, and teenage sex. It was all there, wrapped in glossy cinemascope and starring the radiant Lana Turner. No one expected the book to become a film. It had been banned in libraries, condemned by churches, and burned in bonfires. But Hollywood saw dollar signs and risk. So the filmmakers cleaned up just enough to get past the censors But they didn't hide the story's dark heart. Audiences were stunned. The film didn't scream its sins, it whispered them. And somehow, that was worse. It portrayed teenagers as flawed, adults as hypocrites, and authority figures as predators. In some towns, the film was banned. In others, it played to packed houses. It divided families. "We don't talk about those things," one viewer remembered their mother saying, but that's why everyone wanted to see it. Peyton Place was a hit. It earned 9 Oscar nominations. It made stars out of Hope Lang and Diane Varsi, and it changed what could be said in a mainstream film. It didn't just open the floodgates, it broke the dam, and Hollywood would never be the same again. Thanks for taking this wild journey through Hollywood's most dangerous banned films. If any of these shocked you, or made you curious to watch them, let us know in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories, and ring the bell so you never miss what's next.